Hello, and welcome to our webcast for August 25, 2017. My name is Christian Lebré, and this is Amy Asbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet.
Hello.
And we have
Taylor Hyatt.
Taylor, I'm sorry, I don't remember your family name. Taylor is with us for at least a while. Okay. Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet is a non-religious organization for and by people with disabilities and our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminates against people with disabilities. Today's topics. First one is Council of Canadian Academies, quote, MAID expansion, mature minors. The second one is assisted suicide bills in New Zealand and Australia.
Good. Okay. All right. So the Council of Canadian Academies Medical Aid and Dying Expansion, mature minors. The preamble to Bill C-14, Canada's assisted suicide legislation, specifies 3 possible expansions of assisted suicide to be studied. It's for mature minors, for people with psychiatric disabilities, and those requesting assisted suicide in an advanced directive. And usually that's people with dementia.
So even before applying the law, they are thinking we may expand the law.
Right.
Okay, at least for 3 specified kind, and maybe more.
Right. Let's see. Health Canada has asked the Council of Canadian Academies to study each of these areas. Today and over the next 2 weeks, we will look at each of these topics. Today's webcast will focus on assisted suicide for mature minors. And that's basically people who are near but not at or over 18 years of age. Ill and disabled children grow up in families, often grow up in families, or they grow up once, but there are many of them, where non-disabled parents see their lives as burdensome, tragic, a disappointment of their hopes for the future, and not worth living. The child's disability, rather than the discrimination the family faces, is thought to be the source of the family's problems. When these beliefs and feelings are accepted by the child, the result is low self-esteem.
Yeah, and the perception is this is the disability of the child who is the source of the problem, not the society. And we think it's the other way around.
Right. And, you know, my parents were very stressed out. They already had 9 kids when I was born, and then I had my vision problems, and I had to have surgeries, and there was not enough money, and it was very stressful. And their negative feelings about that, you know, trickled down to me. And because my vision impairment was part of me, I felt bad about my vision impairment because they felt bad about it. And that made my self-esteem really low. Taylor, did you have anything you wanted to add about that?
I wouldn't say that I went through exactly the same thing, but growing up in a single parent home and realizing that many of the difficulties my mom faced and the pressure she had were related to my physical disability. We never talked about it, but the feeling was always there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Taylor, don't worry. Speak and interrupt us.
Yeah.
Amy must explain you how French people talk together.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll just do it naturally.
Ill and disabled people, who may be the only disabled person in the family, lack positive role models at home and in popular culture, and are usually isolated from other disabled people with a positive view of themselves. And I know that was true for me. And it kind of says something. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I cut you off.
Oh, okay. No, there, it says something that now, right now, there's a disabled or, an actor who's a little person who is one of the most popular people on one of the most popular shows. That's the first time that a disabled person has ever portrayed a disabled character. And, it took to 2015 for that to happen. It just started a few years ago that this guy was in this role, and it's taken that long for one disabled actor to make it that far in and be that popular in popular culture. So, did you want to say something?
I think I had, I was thinking of I'm having a mental block right now.
Okay.
What I was thinking of, not only was there no one that resembled me in popular culture, my experience growing up in a small town is that there were plenty of people with physical disabilities around my age, and we modeled our experience off of each other, but there was no one ahead of you to look at and it was going to be like.
Yeah, no older kids or adults, really. And it wasn't really talked about either. So, the experience of being isolated from peers and the subject of parents' negative feelings is very similar to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender children growing up in a homophobic society. And as with LGBT kids, disabled teens are at higher risk for suicide. So, people talk about how oppression affects different groups in different ways, but there are also some commonalities, and that's something that's common between the LGBT community and people with disabilities, that we're often isolated as we're growing up with negative images of ourselves. And, it's not until we reach adulthood that we even can be in touch with other disabled people who have a positive sense of self. Okay, parents who kill disabled children are given more lenient treatment than those who kill non-disabled children, reflecting society's devaluation of the lives of disabled children. In a 1997 study of 35 cases of parents who were sentenced for killing their disabled children, 15 received no jail time. 8 more received up to 5 years in jail, and 9 more spent less than 20 years in prison. This compares to an average sentence of 30 years for child murder where the child is non-disabled.
This is complete two separate words.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. 30 years for one, and for the other, less than 20 years. A lot less. Average maybe something like 5 or 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
And doesn't count even the one who was abandoned.
Right, and that actually doesn't even include the many more cases where the prosecutor decided not to prosecute, or the police investigation didn't find any problems, even though there was a murder of a disabled child. These were just the cases where it got to the point of sentencing. So that study I did when I was in law school, and it was the first, well, actually it was kind of the second time anybody had done a study like that, but it was the first time anybody had done that particular study. So it was, we talked about it in a very early webcast. Let's see. Parents ordering surgery for their disabled children to make them easier to care for is another way disabled children are devalued. For example, the Ashley treatment, named for the first person known to have had it, involves removing a child's sex organs and stunting their growth with hormones so that they can never become adults.
It's a torture.
Right. And also, sterilization of disabled people has been very common for a long time.
Yeah, but I remember the program of Nazi, what they call it,
T4.
the T4. It was, we fight again in the Second World War.
Right.
What happened since?
Right, exactly. That was medical experimentation too, and
okay, remember Dr. Mengele and other kind of doctor.
Right, exactly. Did you want to add anything, Taylor?
I don't think so, except
okay. Disabled children face a much higher risk of abuse than non-disabled children. They are often conditioned to be compliant in many painful and invasive situations. For example, medical treatment and personal care. This makes them ideal victims of abuse while denying the pain they feel and the lack of privacy they experience. And I had founded a support group for disabled survivors of child sexual abuse. And one thing that a lot of the people talked about who had physical disabilities was being made to stand or walk or just in front of a whole bunch of doctors, either naked or almost naked. And the doctors would come and poke them and prod them and stuff like that to see, look at their bodies and how their bodies were leaning and that kind of thing. And that they felt very, very exposed, and it was very abusive that way. And, that was very damaging to them to have to be paraded naked like that in front of, many, many doctors at the same time.
I could imagine it.
Yeah, and that was the mild form of abuse that people were talking about. So, let's see. On top of that, ill and disabled children face the same teenage troubles as non-disabled kids, and some studies have found that they are even more likely to attempt suicide. So disabled kids have the same hormone storms in their brains that non-disabled kids do, and we all know that.
That's nature. That's normal.
It's normal, and society is very aware that that's a problem, and society directs efforts to prevent the suicides of non-disabled teenagers.
But not preventing the suicide of disabled people.
Right. So why should non-disabled adolescents benefit from suicide prevention while ill and disabled youth are encouraged and assisted to kill themselves? A case in point was that of Jerrica Bolin, who died in September of 2016.
Not 100 years ago.
No, this was last year. Jerrica, who had a neuromuscular dystrophy, received widespread support and thousands of dollars in donations for a last dance when she publicly announced that she wanted to go to hospice to die. Activists with similar disabilities expressed concern about whether Jericho was receiving good health care and pain management, and disability rights activists also questioned the outpouring of public support for her death, while society pledges to prevent the suicide of non-disabled teens. So there was, everybody was, this poor girl, she's suffering so badly, blah, blah, blah. Let's give her money so she can have this last dance.
Yeah, they give a lot of money to help her killed, but nobody gave a shit about make her a living.
Right, exactly. I've seen a lot of times where people have had, GoFundMe or similar requests for funding on Facebook because they need supports to live, and those don't get the same kind of response as this girl's request for a last dance. So we have our priorities a little screwed up, I think.
Yeah.
In fact, just this morning, we learned of a 19-year-old in England, Tommy Swales, who had Friedreich's ataxia, who killed himself because of depression. He had talked about his desire to commit suicide to his mother and on social media. So there was warning about this over, the couple of years before he killed himself, but somehow his suicide was not prevented. And that's, you know.
Yeah, nobody do any move to prevent it.
Right. Well, we don't know exactly, but whatever happened, it wasn't effective.
Yeah, but at least I could say that it was insufficient.
Right. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Taylor?
I think in Jerrica Bolin's case, no one addressed the multiple oppressions that she had.
Right.
She was also a young person of color, a member of the LGBT community. And I'm horrified at the isolation. Just like with me, there was no picture of here is what your adult life could be.
Right, exactly. There was no "It Gets Better" campaign for her, which is,
yeah.
"It Gets Better" campaign is what people have been pushing for the lesbian, gay, transgender, and bisexual kids who are going through identity crisis issues. Basically saying, yeah, it's tough right now as an adolescent, but it gets better when you grow up. But there was no such campaign for Jerrica Bolin, other than, you know, what people with disabilities individually tried to tell her. But you know, there was no public outpouring of this in the same kind as for her support for her decision to die. So many laws, such as those forbidding underage use of tobacco and alcohol, limit teenagers' freedoms in order to prevent self-inflicted harm. Preventing people under 18 years of age from having assisted suicide would be consistent with current public policy. So it's...
Yeah, it doesn't hurt the human right.
Right.
In any country.
Right.
It's why people are not allowed to buy smoke before 18 years old or buy booze.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we already limit their access to certain things because of their age and the notion that these are self-inflicted harms.
Yeah, those are poison.
Right, exactly. So why shouldn't we limit them access to poisons that will kill them? Okay. Anything you want to add on that, Taylor?
Depending on how the situation turns out, saying to me that we're considering allowing someone to make their life or death decision before, for example, they can drive. They can make a rash decision that would lead to the end of their own life before being allowed to get behind the wheel of this metal contraption that more lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, a suicide is a suicide is a suicide.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Precisely.
I don't know how and why groups against suicide doesn't do anything against assisted suicide.
Well, they call it something else. They say it's not suicide. They say it's assisted dying.
Yeah, but this is just a name.
Right.
The reality, it is a suicide.
Right, of course. But the people who promote assisted suicide have successfully inserted this euphemism to create a new category of something, and the suicide prevention people have bought it, and that's the unfortunate thing.
Yeah, but in reality, there is no category of suicide. Right. There is suicide. That's it.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Our next topic: assisted suicide bills in New Zealand and Australia. Last month, a ministerial advisory panel in the Australian state of Victoria released recommendations for assisted suicide legislation. The panel recommended that citizens and permanent residents who are 18 or older and have, quote, sound decision-making capacity, unquote, should be able to request drugs from their doctors in order to end their lives. In cases where the person cannot self-administer the drug, a doctor may do it for them. Therefore, both assisted suicide and euthanasia would be permitted. So that's their plan down under, and it's being considered, and the disability community there is doing its best to fight against it, but you know, it's an uphill battle. The person's medical condition must be predicted to cause death within 12 months, which is more than the usual 6 months, and it makes predicting even more difficult and opens the gate wider for more people. And the condition must cause suffering that cannot be relieved in a manner that is tolerable to the person, quote unquote. Death certificates would record the person's condition as the cause of death. The bill is expected to be brought forward in the state parliament in September. If passed, it would come into force in 2019. So that's being debated very hotly in Australia right now. And Liz Carr, who is an actor in England, brought her production of Assisted Suicide, the musical, down to Australia earlier this spring and tried to get the prime minister of that, or the premier of that state to come and attend the place, but he didn't go, which was unfortunate. But she's done a lot of work supporting the disability community's opposition to that bill in Australia. Okay, meanwhile, in New Zealand, the End of Life Choices Act is awaiting first reading. In this case, the person's condition must be grievous and irremediable, which is the same language from Canada, and in an advanced state of irreversible decline, also the same language.
A lot of trouble with this definition.
Right, exactly. Or the condition must cause death within 6 months. So that's,
again, doctors have a great difficulty to be precise about the time of death in advance, and even sometime for 2 weeks. So just think about 6 months. It's kind of impossible.
Yeah, exactly. Eligible citizens and permanent residents must be able to understand the, quote, nature, unquote, and consequences of assisted death. A variety of methods must be offered to the person, including oral consumption and IV delivery initiated by the person, injection by another person, or delivery via feeding tube. So it's either assisted suicide or euthanasia again. The death certificates must include both the person's condition and a reference to assisted suicide. So at least they're being more honest on the death certificates.
Yeah, they bring themselves a tool to do a survey. Right. At least they will be cautious. They are cautious about the application of the law.
Yeah, at least they're being a little more careful about measuring what happens afterwards.
Yeah,
but
they bring themselves, they build themselves a tool.
A teeny bit anyway.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the New Zealand Parliament's Health Committee has just released the results of a 2-year inquiry into the topic of assisted suicide. The committee refused to endorse assisted suicide and euthanasia.
They do their job.
Yeah, citing public safety concerns. Now, they didn't condemn it either, but they refused to endorse legalizing it, which is a good thing. So that was kind of a positive outcome. Okay, Taylor, did you want to add anything to that?
I was relieved to see the provisions for consent and understanding the procedure at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems to indicate that they won't accept advanced directives and people who have dementia. So that would be good. Okay, there are many reasons to oppose legalization of assisted suicide and euthanasia. Here are just a few. First, it's unnecessary because everyone has the option to commit suicide or to refuse medical care and have palliative sedation on demand. Also, it's discriminatory because while people without disabilities receive suicide prevention services if they express a wish to die, people with disabilities will be encouraged and to kill themselves. Also, choice is an illusion because the choice to die cannot be free as long as people with disabilities don't have the choice in where and how to live. And finally, safeguards just don't work. Where these practices are legal, safeguards do not prevent people with disabilities from being wrongly killed. So if you want more information about the topics we discuss here, you can visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujourvivant, not dead yet. You can visit our website at tvndy.ca, send an email to info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks to Taylor and thanks to Christian for helping out.
Thank you, Amy.
And we'll see you again next time.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.